I've worked in the recruitment advertising industry for about 20 years, or the employer branding industry, as we call it now. I've got the Grim Reaper icon up there because quite a few of the agencies I used to work for don't seem to exist anymore. But people like Barker's and Park and PA Advertising, they all seem to demise. You can judge whether that's my fault maybe in the next 20 minutes. I joined the in-house fraternity about 8 years ago. I work for a company called Avanade, which is a tech company based out of Seattle. It's a joint venture of Microsoft and Accenture. I was the global recruitment marketing manager for those guys. And then I had a spell at Alexander Mann Solutions, who you're probably all aware of too. And I joined IQVIA about 2 years ago. And what I'm going to do, actually, before I do that, the reason I'm up here today is I've gone to quite a few of these conferences in the past, and I find when people talk about the EVP, they don't necessarily talk about all of it. They talk about a bit of it. They might talk about the research bit. They might talk about the rollout. They certainly never talk about results, and they don't really talk about next steps, in my experience anyway. Maybe I haven't been to enough conferences. So that's why I thought I'd just go up and say, from my experience, and maybe you might think at the end of it, well, he hasn't said everything, but I'm just trying to maybe correct, I think, a little bit of a balance in terms of how people talk about EVP. So, the agenda I'm going to talk through is a little bit on who we are, very briefly, but most importantly, why we needed to do this in terms of rollout an EVP, how you should plan for it in terms of, literally from the, as the Americans say, and I work with a lot of Americans, soup to nuts, so how you started off, main course, etc., dessert. Research and insights of what your research should be, and then how that goes into developing your creative, your strategy, launching that, measuring the success of it, ROI, which is tricky. It's not easy. So I'll talk about that a little bit. Next steps, because an EVP is always ongoing. And share some of the learnings that I had over the last year or so. So a little bit about IQVIA. It's one of those big companies that you've never heard of, which, again, you could blame on me, but isn't really my fault. The name's only 2 years old, and we are in quite a specialised field, but there are a lot of us, there's 60,000 people. Bit of blurb on the top there. So we were formed out of 2 companies. You may have heard of Quintiles, if you're at all in medical research. They're the largest clinical research organisation in the world. And IMS Health hold the most medical data in the world. What that means together, they've come up with something called human data science, which we've copyrighted. And what that means is we use data in healthcare. We've got more data than anyone else. 30 petabytes of data, which I'm led to believe is quite a lot. In fact, we have more processing power than Google, although I can't officially say that, but we do. And we employ a lot of data scientists to go through these 70 billion odd healthcare transactions that we've got. We work with millions of healthcare providers, 85% of the world's pharmaceuticals as well. And what we do, what we're allowed to do, and what the change that we have is that the pharmaceutical industry is all based on developing drugs. We actually investigate how they've worked, and then we feed that back to pharma companies, hospitals, to say, you did all these treatments, this is actually what worked and what didn't work, and then we can feed that into research and treatments going onwards. So that's roughly who we are. I think before I go into talking about the EVP as well, I just want to make a quick distinction between employer brand and EVP, because they are often confused with each other, quite rightly, because they do sound quite similar. But the employer brand is the external perception, so it's what people outside, or as our friend Jeff says there, your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room, so the external perception. And the EVP is the internal perception, i.e. the truth. And what you want to achieve in doing one of these projects is putting those two together. That's the sweet spot. You want, by developing your EVP and pushing out, you want people to understand what it's worth to, you want the EVP and the employer brand to come together, essentially. So for your EVP to become your employer brand, the internal to become the external. Why did we need to do the EVP? A couple of quite major reasons. One, we've just gone through a merger. So you've got two huge legacy organisations, two candidate propositions, two branding propositions, and we need to put out the name of IQVIA. IQVIA is only 2 years old, not even 2 years old. So people are familiar with those old names, but they're not familiar with our name. So what do we stand for? We also, to make it slightly more complicated, we try to recruit in most of the most difficult sectors you can recruit in, particularly data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning is a key sweet spot for us, and there's no one who does that. We hire a lot of people, so 16,000 people a year, although quite a bit of that is acquisition. So we're acquiring at any one time 20 companies a year as well, so we're kind of taking over the world. Actually, that's 20 companies who have their own brand and own proposition as well, and we need to decide whether to subsume them into IQVIA or to let those particular brands run as well. Also, what we wanted to say is something other than make a difference, which is a very common statement that you find in the healthcare industry. There's nothing wrong with that, and it is a very strong thing to say, and a lot of people say it, as you can see there. But I think particularly, people make that choice when they enter into the healthcare industry about making a difference. But when they want to change jobs and go from one healthcare provider to another, is it make a difference that really will make the difference in them deciding to make that choice? Probably not. That'll be something to do it, but it's going to be all the other factors that come into a role, whether that's salary, location, clients, technology, projects, etc. So what we wanted to do was, as well as create an EVP, is differentiate it from those around us as well. So some first steps I would say for you to do if you are thinking of embarking upon this. Although I've been in the industry for quite a long time, I hadn't done a full EVP, because you don't really do that in the agency world from the start all the way through to launch and managing it thereon. So do some research. I find that Universe and Richard Moseley, those books are pretty, they'll give you the fundamentals in terms of what a EVP employer brand project's about. Talk to your colleagues, your peers, look at what your competitors are doing as well, in terms of getting an idea, and that's really important in terms of differentiation. Then you can move to the vendor research and evaluation. We always knew we were going to use two vendors. One to do the research, one to do our creative as well. We didn't have either of those to start off with. So it doesn't mean that you've necessarily, because you've got an agency at the moment, they're your creative agency, that they might be the right ones to do any of that. I've worked at a lot of employer branding agencies. There aren't many who can do the whole thing. In fact, I might argue that there aren't any, but there's probably some of them here, so I won't say that. But not many have all the research capability and to do the creative as well. So it's just a choice. There are some who can do it, but we went with two options, and we chose Universum, which then allowed us to build our business case based on many of the other factors you've seen in terms of why we need to do it. In terms of building the business case as well and ensuring people that are involved in the project with you, I know there is a further presentations today about stakeholder involvement, so I won't go on too much about that, but senior stakeholder involvement is really important. We had a project governance group that met every week, and on that group was the head of talent acquisition, the chief of staff to the head of HR, various other regional TA people. So I reported to them on the progress of the project, and then I had the steering committee, which were kind of my little helpers, really. Regionally, from people from South America, North America, APAC, India, so we're getting a global perspective and everything, and then from the different businesses we've got. So I had about 15 people actually working with me on this project who would take on different roles, depending as we went along. One last point as well there, in terms of external expertise, if you're working with a vendor, use them for some of your arguments internally as well. If your CHRO is saying, why should we do this, get the expert on to talk, rather than yourself, where you could shoot down and you don't know all the answers. So I'd say to use them. In terms of research, this is a slide about research, and I'll just get to my postcard that talks about that. The point about an EVP is that it has to be the truth, as I've said. And you can't actually get the truth without doing research. There's no point just putting your finger in the air or coming up with some kind of statements that you think sound right or sound like your competitors. You've got to talk to your own employees. And even if at the end of the day you then come up with everything that everyone else says, at least it's the truth and it reflects what's in your company. And also it's got to be the truth, because if it isn't, then your employees won't buy into it. And an internal launch of the EVP is just as important as the external launch. And the new joiners or anyone who signs up because of the EVP won't be very happy when they join you, because you're not living up to your promises. So that will lead to retention issues. We did a lot of research. We talked to global leaders, about 25 or almost about 30 of those. The point of talking to global leaders is to get sign-in throughout the company, which helps, but also it means that your EVP is future-proof. We're a company that's acquiring 20 companies every year. We are developing new products that have never been developed before. So the leaders are the people who know more about that than, let's say, the people on the shop floor. By talking to them, you're making sure that what you're saying is future-proof to a certain extent. We surveyed our employees. We got about 10,000 of those to respond to a survey, which is about 20%, which I'm told is a pretty good response rate. And then we held various focus groups, internal, external, and then we tested with those groups in terms of the veracity of our research. We also, through Universum, compared our data to similar candidate populations, similar kind of workers in different companies around the world, and to see where there is synergy and differentiation. And then we could build that into our messaging as well. And that research came up with this messaging framework. And there are 3 pillars in our EVP, and those pillars unite all of our workforce, i.e. all of our workforce come to work and stay at work because they share 1, 2, or 3 of those qualities. Firstly is around a passion for healthcare, which is that make a difference piece. We have a largely clinical workforce, and they want to be at work to make the world a healthier place. So that's that kind of inspiring purpose that drives them on. But they also want to be in a place that's a high-performance culture and is challenging, and its work is certainly challenging at IQVIA. Secondly, disrupt conventional thinking. That's a very common phrase that you see in lots of EVPs and lots of statements. What does it mean from our point of view? From our point of view, it is the need and the want to change what you do for the better. So that can apply for the data scientist who's looking for a cure for cancer, which our guys do, but also to the production operator who looks at a process that we've done for years and years and years and thinks they can do it better. And be encouraged to do that, be in an environment that supports them to do that. The last one is make an impact and grow, which is about taking control of your career within IQVIA, ideally not outside. But again, having the support to do that and the mobility to do that and the flexibility to do that. So that's kind of the principles behind the EVP. There's a vision statement. That's kind of the elevator pitch around what the EVP stands for. I was going to read it out, but I won't really. Again, some of this language that you'll see up there, you'll see is potentially fairly standard from company to company. But what we did was this drives directly from our research into the pillars, into this statement. And we tested this statement as well, internally and externally, to see how it resonated. And it works with people, and that's why it's there. What does it look like? In terms of our creative, what we did, again, I said we used 2 vendors. We did a vendor pitch, and we worked with AIA. AIA, as they're known in the UK, but TMP, as they're known globally. There are 2 TMPs in the UK, by the way, TMP Worldwide, which isn't particularly worldwide, and and I hope they're not here, and AIA, who are owned by TMP, who are worldwide, if that makes any sense. And so we went with them because we've got a global network and because most of my stakeholders that I work with day in, day out are from the US. So we needed a US agency, although most of the work I do is with AI in the UK. So there's our brand, which comes from our master brand, so in terms of the frame and the blue piece, it works with that, but we added some touches in terms of that kind of overlay and the language, obviously. I mean, what we've got there at the moment are some stock shots of people with, perfect teeth. One of our next steps I'll be talking about is moving to our own employees, but our corporate visual is to use stock shots, and that's kind of a battle I've got at the moment. We will be using our own employees. Where we rolled it out, just a couple of examples here on all our platforms, external candidate platforms. So our careers site, if you go to look at that on IQVIA.com, careers, social media, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, Indeed, etc., etc. What we also did, and what's the most important thing, is actually arming your employees, particularly in talent acquisition and marketing, to use the assets, because I'm in a global team of 2. There's me and there's a lady in North Carolina, so there's only so much we can do ourselves. What we need to do is work with our 300 people in talent acquisition, 1,000 odd in marketing, and use other brand ambassadors as well to push out the message. So you can go to our intranet, and that's our EVP page. You can download all our videos, you can download all our assets. You can also go on there and create your own flyers and print them off, all with approved imagery, approved copy, etc., etc. We also did an external launch video, and we did an internal launch video. And I'm going to just play you this video to give an idea of how it worked. And this was watched by about 2/3 of our employees. About 30,000 people saw this. Let's see if it works.
In 2016, we brought 2 great companies together. In 2017, we formed IQVIA, and even though we're still new, we're on an exciting path forward. United by common goals, ideas, and aspirations, we're proud of what we do, making the world a healthier place and reinventing the healthcare industry by combining data science and human science. And we're pleased that you're with us on our journey. We also want to attract more great colleagues like you to our global community. And that's why we've created our Employee Value Proposition, or EVP. Our EVP speaks to both existing as well as potential employees and paints a picture of what it means to be part of the IQVIA team. Our EVP describes our sense of identity and purpose. It helps differentiate us from our competitors, attract and retain talented people, engage with each other, and ultimately tell the IQVIA story from an employee perspective. So you may be asking yourself, where did our new EVP come from? Over the first half of 2018, we conducted global interviews, employee surveys, and focus groups, both internally and externally, to collect data around what people think of our company. And from this research, we defined 3 pillars which show who we are and who we aspire to be. First, a passion for a healthier world unites us all. This challenges us and inspires us to give our best in everything we do. Second, we want to disrupt conventional thinking. We're brave minds pushing boundaries and solving problems differently. And third, we encourage you to make an impact and grow. Learn new things and enjoy what you do in an environment where you're supported to succeed. And I'm inviting you to be a narrator of our exciting story as it continues to unfold. Share the experiences that inspire you and tell the story of brave minds and innovative thinkers facing challenges big and small every day and working together to change healthcare.
I guess I could have just played that video and had it all over and done within 2 minutes, but anyway, I didn't. So we launched that, and let me see. Use the clicker again. Use clicker again. Yes, good. So yeah, external video, brand video, which is different to that, and we launched on LinkedIn and got about 150,000 odd impressions. We do a lot of video, actually. I've filmed about 30 to 40 employee videos over the last year or so in different locations. All are, in APAC, North America, and Europe as well. So video is important to us. 8 months on, I think it's early days and there's a lot of work to do, but I think our employees are starting to adopt the EVP. There's some examples of people. That was at the The left was one of our North American offices and a party they had, and they had a straw container for cocktails. The middle one's the one I'm probably most proud of. We opened a new office in Kochi in Kerala in India, and throughout that office there are murals. That mural is about 4 meters wide, 2 or 3 meters high. They film their own employees and they put them into the murals, and they're throughout the office, sort of reinforcing the message of the EVP. And actually, we've got a new office in Reading, and I'm there tomorrow to install similar kind of things to that. That's our leadership team in Manila. If you do a global EVP, work with APAC as much as possible, because they are keen as mustard for this stuff, and they're not like cynical Europeans. They really want to do it. So just a little tip: if you want to show pictures, you'll get many more out of your APAC colleagues. But it's an ongoing process. So in terms of evangelization, that is constant. I present all the time to talent acquisition, to marketing. I do town halls, training sessions around the EVP and how to use the assets and what it's all about, and talking to the same audience 3 or 4 times, because you have to do that. Got EVP brand ambassadors, so a team on the ground who are in different regions, different business units, pushing out the message of the EVP. Work closely with HR, and I'll give you some examples of that in a moment. And talking to the HRLT, your leadership team in HR, to make sure that they can remember what you're doing and why they signed it off in the first place, but also they need your continued support to keep it going. Talking of internal activation, that's as important as external, because if your employees don't buy into it, then, as I say, once an external employee comes in, what's happened to Brave Minds, what's happened to any of the messaging. So here's some examples of some of that. You'll see the word impact, which is one of our EVP words, through our CSR program, which is the IQVIA day, that's like a volunteers day. The impact program there is a employee recognition program that we have, and that was our career goals as well. And increasingly, what the CEO says and other people say, externally and through emails as well, is coloured through EVP language. In terms of results, I talked about results at the start. Some results are easier to gauge than others. I think from a branding point of view, it's easier to see external branding. So, for example, we got a 30% increase almost instantaneously when we launched the EVP in terms of user sessions, and that's been maintained and actually increased since EVP launch. LinkedIn and other social media, actually, we've had huge growth since the launch of the EVP last October, and our videos as well. If I look at the rate of increase of how they've been viewed, that's markedly increased since the EVP launched. But the EVP also impacts on HR metrics, albeit a little bit indirectly. You don't sort of hang yourself out there to say, yes, the EVP will reduce our time to hire or improve our retention rates. No, but it is a contributing factor. But it's more a long-term piece as well. So we're doing that in a couple of ways. We're putting the EVP pillars, they were put into the 2018 Employee Engagement Survey just before it launched, actually. And then we're going to test it in a couple of months to see, again, how they're resonating with our employees. And we're looking at other trends slightly more in the long term. It keeps on going. So, as I say, I'm launching some posters in Reading next week, and we're doing a full branding campaign, actually working with AIA to do that. And looking at things like screensavers as well, which is quite a big piece for 60,000 employees, but conversations are ongoing about that. If there's one thing I could do now, it's the second bullet point, which is integrating the EVP into yearly goals and competencies. Because if someone has to measure themselves against whether they have a brave mind or not, then they'll be thinking about it, and they'll be bringing it into their work. We've got, I'm talking with L&D about learning and development, about doing that. I'm hopeful, things move quite slowly, but I'm hopeful of pushing that out maybe towards the end of the year. We've got a global EVP video photo competition, so what does it mean to work at IQVIA? Again, we'll probably get 300 videos from India and 3 from France, but you get good content and also gets people engaged with what you're trying to do. And as I said before, using our own employees for photography as well to get rid of some of these perfect teeth up there. Last slide, which just some learnings that I've taken away from this. It takes longer than you think. I think the average lifespan of a global EVP from beginning to end in terms of the project is around 18 months. We had 12. Our HRD wanted to do it in 3. So it was a bit of a negotiation, but we ended up at 12 ultimately. I'd rather have had longer. Second point is quite key and something I'm sort of battling with at the moment. And I think it's very common in organisations that and with all of us, we focus on projects. We focus on building a new career site, building a new employer referral program. Who's going to run that? Because you've got your other day job to do. And I think you need to think about that when you launch as well. Is it going to be you? Is it going to be other people? How are you going to manage the EVP going forward? Because just because you launch it, it doesn't mean that everyone goes, wow, can I get involved with that later? They'll just say, how do I do it? What do I do? What do I do? And keep staring at you. Ensure all of HR are bought in. Yes, you need your senior stakeholder, but when you're talking alone to the head of HR for North America, they might not like the EVP. So you've got to keep talking to those guys as well. I was, for the last point, going to put a picture of a gremlin up here, but my agency didn't allow me to do that for copyright reasons. But, you need to, once you've launched, it's a bit like social media, once you've dived in or dove in, it's there, and you just got to keep feeding it, whether that's you or anyone else, because if not, it'll just wither on the vine. And there's lots of, I've been involved from an agency perspective where, the EVP project ends up as a poster in the HRD's wall, and that's it. Or it's a launch, and that's it. And that's not really good enough. That's not how you'll integrate an EVP into an organisation. And the reason why you should do it is that ultimately, if you don't, whatever you're saying doesn't really mean anything. It's a house without foundations. So that is the story of my EVP. Thank you.